In a small town called Vittoria, tucked away in the southern corner of Sicily, a little girl was born who would one day shock the entire world. Her name was Cristina Scuccia, and from the moment she could speak, she could sing. Her family was not rich. Her father spent long days under the hot Sicilian sun, working as a bricklayer, building homes and walls with his rough, calloused hands. Her mother stayed home to look after the children, making sure there was always food on the table and love in the house. They did not have fancy cars or expensive clothes. What they had was faith, deep, unshakable faith in God. Every Sunday, the Scuccia family walked to the local church together. Cristina's parents prayed with their whole hearts. They sang hymns with their eyes closed and their hands raised. But little Cristina, she was different. She sat in the wooden pew, swinging her legs back and forth, waiting for the service to end. Church felt like a chore to her. It was something she had to do, not something she wanted to do. What she wanted was music, but not the kind of music that played in church. At home, whenever she had the chance, Cristina would listen to pop songs on the radio. She fell in love with the voices of famous singers like Mariah Carey and Celine Dion. There was something magical about the way they sang, the way their voices climbed high and then dropped low, filling the room with emotion. When nobody was watching, Cristina would grab a hairbrush, pretend it was a microphone, and sing along at the top of her lungs. She would imagine herself on a big stage, wearing a sparkling dress, with thousands of people cheering her name. Her parents noticed her talent early. How could they not? Her voice was powerful, pure, and full of feeling. When Cristina sang, people stopped what they were doing and listened. It was a gift, and everyone around her knew it. But in a small Sicilian town, dreams of becoming a pop star felt far away, almost impossible. There were no talent agencies in Vittoria, no music producers scouting for the next big thing. There were only olive groves, old stone buildings, and the same faces you saw every single day. For a girl with big dreams, this quiet life felt suffocating. Still, Cristina found ways to use her voice. She joined the local parish choir, standing among the older women and men, adding her young voice to theirs. She sang at community events, at weddings, even at small piano bars where people came to have dinner and enjoy live music. Every time she performed, she felt alive. She felt like herself. Music was not just something she loved. It was who she was. As she grew older, the pull toward music only got stronger. She started to imagine a future where she could sing for a living, where her voice could reach beyond the borders of her tiny town. She dreamed of recording albums, of seeing her face on magazine covers, of hearing her songs played on radios across the world. Because while Cristina was dreaming of pop stardom, her parents were praying that she would find her way to God. They never forced their faith on her. They never demanded that she give up her music, but they hoped, quietly and patiently, that one day their daughter would feel the same connection to God that they felt. They believed that faith was the greatest gift they could give her. Cristina, however, was not interested. She respected her parents. She loved them deeply. But their prayers felt like background noise to her. She went through the motions, attending Mass, bowing her head during prayers, but her heart was somewhere else. Her heart was on a stage, under bright lights, with a microphone in her hand. Then something happened that nobody expected. Something that would change the entire direction of Cristina's life. When she was 19 years old, her mother came to her with an idea. There was going to be a musical production in their area. A special performance to celebrate 100 years of the Ursuline Sisters. A religious order of nuns. They needed singers and performers. Cristina's mother thought it would be a wonderful opportunity for her daughter to use her voice. At first, Cristina was not excited. A musical about nuns? That was not exactly what she had in mind when she imagined her future in show business. But her mother encouraged her, gently pushing her to try. And Cristina, perhaps just to make her mother happy, agreed to audition. She got the part. But not just any part. She was cast as the lead role, playing a woman named Sister Rosa Rakuzo. Sister Rosa was not a fictional character. She was a real person, the founder of the very branch of the Ursuline sisters that the musical was celebrating. She was a woman who had dedicated her entire life to serving God and helping others. Christina threw herself into the role. She memorized her lines. She practiced her songs. Night after night, she stepped onto the stage and became Sister Rosa. She wore the nun's habit. She spoke the words of prayer. She pretended to live a life devoted entirely to faith. And then something strange started happening. At first, it was just a feeling. A warmth in her chest during certain scenes. A sense of peace that she could not explain. But as the performances continued, the feeling grew stronger. Christina began to see Sister Rosa not just as a character, but as a real person, with real convictions. She started to understand why someone would give up everything. Comfort, money, even the chance at a family, to serve a higher purpose. For the first time in her life, Christina began to wonder if maybe her parents had been right all along. Maybe there was something to this faith thing. Maybe there was a reason she had been given this voice. Maybe it was not meant for pop stardom. Maybe it was meant for something else entirely. The musical ended, but the questions did not stop. Christina lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She thought about her dreams of becoming a famous singer. She thought about the life she had always imagined for herself. And then she thought about Sister Rosa, about the peace and purpose that radiated from every word of the character she had played. She prayed for the first time in years. Not because her parents asked her to, not because she was at church, but because she genuinely wanted answers. She asked God to show her the right path. She asked for a sign, for clarity, for anything that would help her understand what she was supposed to do with her life. The answer, when it came, surprised everyone. Most of all, it surprised Christina herself. She gathered her family together one evening and told them she had made a decision. She was not going to pursue a career as a pop singer. She was not going to chase fame and fortune in some distant city. Instead, she was going to do something that nobody saw coming. She was going to become a nun. Her parents were stunned. They had always hoped their daughter would find her way to God, but they never imagined it would happen like this. Christina, the girl who used to daydream through church services, the teenager who sang pop songs into her hairbrush, was now saying she wanted to dedicate her life to religious service. It was a decision that would close one door forever. The dream of becoming a famous singer, the fantasy she had carried with her since childhood, would have to be packed away. There would be no more stages, no more spotlights, no more imagining her name in lights. Or so she thought, because what Christina did not know, what nobody could have predicted, was that this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The girl who gave up her dream of singing would one day stand on the biggest stage of her life and give a performance that the whole world would never forget. But that moment was still years away. And first, Christina Scuccia had to become someone new. She had to become Sister Christina. At the age of 20, Christina Scuccia walked through the doors of the Ursuline Sisters of the Holy Family and left her old life behind. She traded her colorful clothes for a simple black habit. She exchanged her pop music collection for prayer books. The girl who once dreamed of singing on stages around the world was now waking up at dawn to pray in silence. Her family supported her decision, even though it broke their hearts a little. They had always wanted her to find God, but they also knew how much she loved to sing. Watching her give up that dream was not easy. Still, they trusted that their daughter knew what she was doing. They believed that God had a plan for her, even if they could not see it yet. The first months in the convent were hard. Christina had to learn a completely new way of living. There were strict schedules to follow. Morning prayers began early, often before the sun came up. There were hours of silent reflection. community meals eaten without conversation, and long periods of work and service. Privacy was rare. Everything was shared. Everything was simple. For a young woman who had spent her teenage years dreaming of glamour and excitement, this was a shock. There were moments when Christina wondered if she had made the right choice. Late at night, lying in her small bed in a room she shared with other novices, she would think about the life she had given up. She would remember the thrill of performing, the rush of hearing people applaud, the joy of losing herself in a song. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now. A different Christina. A Christina who no longer existed, but she did not quit. Something kept her going. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was faith. Or maybe it was the quiet voice inside her that whispered this was exactly where she needed to be, even when it did not feel like it. After her initial training, the order sent Christina to Brazil. It was a mission assignment, a chance to serve the poor in one of the most vibrant and challenging countries in the world. She packed her few belongings and flew across the ocean, leaving behind everything familiar. Brazil was nothing like Sicily. The heat was different, heavier, and more humid. The sounds were different, a constant mix of music, voices, and traffic. The poverty was different too, more visible, more heartbreaking. Christina was assigned to work with children in communities where families struggled to survive. These were kids who did not have enough food, who wore torn clothes, who had seen more hardship in their short lives than most people see in a lifetime. At first, Christina felt overwhelmed. What could she possibly offer these children? She was just a young nun from a small town in Sicily. She did not speak Portuguese fluently. She did not have money or resources. All she had was her faith and her willingness to show up every single day. But then she discovered something. She discovered that she did have something to offer. Something powerful. Something that crossed every language barrier and touched every heart. She had her voice. Brazil is a country that breathes music. It is everywhere. In the streets, in the churches, in the homes, in the way people move and talk and celebrate. Music is not just entertainment there. It is life itself. And the children Christina worked with, despite all their struggles, loved to sing and dance. It was one of the few joys they had. So Christina started singing with them. At first, it was just simple songs, children's tunes and religious hymns. But the kids responded with such enthusiasm that she kept going. She organized little music sessions. She taught them songs. She let them teach her Brazilian melodies in return. For the first time since entering the convent, Christina felt that old spark again. The spark she thought she had buried forever. And something clicked in her mind. A realization that would shape the rest of her life. Music and faith were not enemies. They were not opposites that she had to choose between. They could exist together. They could strengthen each other. Her voice was not something she had to silence in order to serve God. Her voice was a gift from God. And maybe, just maybe, she was supposed to use it. This idea changed everything. Christina returned to Italy after 2 years in Brazil with a new sense of purpose. She was transferred to a convent in Milan, where she continued her religious duties. She served lunch to children at a nursery school. She helped run a hostel for university students. She attended morning prayers and evening masses. She lived the quiet, devoted life of a nun, but she also started training her voice again. With permission from her superiors, Christina enrolled at a music academy in Rome called the Star Rose Academy. It was run by people who understood that art and faith could go hand in hand. There, she studied under a singer and songwriter named Franco Simone, who helped her develop her natural talent into something even more powerful. She learned technique. She learned control. She learned how to take the raw emotion she felt inside and channel it through her voice in a way that could move anyone who listened. Her fellow nuns supported her. They saw the joy that music brought her. And they recognized that this joy was not separate from her faith. It was an expression of it. When Christina sang, she was praising God in her own unique way. The Mother Superior, the nun in charge of the convent, understood this. She gave Christina the freedom to explore her gift, as long as she continued to honor her vows and serve her community. In 2013, Christina entered a Christian music competition called the Good News Festival. It was a small event, nothing like the big television shows that attracted millions of viewers. But for Christina, it was a chance to test herself, to see if her voice could reach people beyond the walls of the convent. She won. It was not international news. It did not make headlines around the world. But it caught the attention of someone important. A talent scout who worked for a popular Italian television show called The Voice of Italy. The Voice was a huge deal. It was one of the most watched programs in the country. A singing competition where unknown performers could become stars overnight. The format was simple but dramatic. Contestants sang for a panel of celebrity judges who sat with their backs turned, unable to see who was performing. They could only hear the voice. If they liked what they heard, they would hit a button and spin around to claim that singer for their team. It was exciting, unpredictable, and wildly popular. The scout reached out to Christina with an invitation. Would she be interested in auditioning for The Voice of Italy? Christina's heart raced when she heard the offer. This was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed about as a teenager. A chance to sing on national television. A chance to share her voice with millions of people. It was everything she had once wanted, delivered to her doorstep years after she thought she had given it up forever. But she was a nun now. She had taken vows. She had committed her life to God and to her religious community. She could not just walk onto a television set and perform pop songs like some ordinary contestant. Could she? She brought the invitation to her Mother Superior, fully expecting to be told no. After all, what convent would allow one of their nuns to compete on a flashy singing show? It seemed absurd. It seemed inappropriate. It seemed like exactly the kind of worldly distraction that religious life was supposed to avoid. Christina held her breath and waited for the answer. And then, to her complete shock, the Mother Superior said yes. Not only did she say yes, but she gave Christina her full blessing. The producers had already contacted the Superior General of the congregation to discuss the possibility. Everyone agreed that this could be a beautiful opportunity. A chance for Christina to share her gift with the world and spread a message of joy and faith to people who might never step inside a church. Christina could hardly believe it. The door she thought had closed forever was suddenly wide open. She was going to audition for The Voice of Italy. She was going to sing on national television. She was going to step onto a stage in her black habit, her wooden cross hanging around her neck, and show the world what a nun with a dream could do. She had no idea that what came next would change her life forever. On the morning of the 19th of March 2014, Christina Scuccia woke up before dawn. She had barely slept the night before. Her stomach was full of butterflies, and her mind was racing with thoughts she could not quiet. Today was the day. Today she would walk onto the stage of The Voice of Italy and sing in front of millions of people. She went through her morning routine as she always did. She prayed. She ate a simple breakfast. She put on her black habit, smoothed it down with her hands, and adjusted the wooden crucifix that hung around her neck. She looked at herself in the mirror and took a deep breath. The woman staring back at her was a nun. A 25-year-old nun from Sicily who was about to do something that no nun had ever done before. 3 of her fellow sisters traveled with her to the television studio. They were not just there for moral support. They genuinely believed in her. They had watched her practice, heard her sing in the convent halls, and knew that she had a gift that deserved to be shared. As they entered the studio together, Christina felt their presence like a warm blanket around her shoulders. She was not alone. She had her sisters. She had her faith. And she had her voice. The studio was overwhelming. Bright lights hung from the ceiling. Cameras were everywhere, pointed in every direction, ready to capture every moment. Crew members rushed around with headsets and clipboards, shouting instructions and checking equipment. The energy in the room was electric, buzzing with excitement and nervous anticipation. Christina waited backstage with the other contestants. Some of them looked like rock stars, dressed in leather jackets and ripped jeans. Others looked like pop princesses, with perfect hair and glittering outfits. And then there was Christina, standing quietly in her nun's habit, clutching her rosary beads and whispering prayers under her breath. People stared at her. She could feel their eyes, curious and confused. What was a nun doing here? Was this some kind of joke? Christina ignored the looks. She had learned long ago that people would always have opinions. What mattered was not what they thought of her. What mattered was what she knew to be true in her heart. When her name was called, Christina walked toward the stage. Her fellow nuns were positioned backstage where they could watch on a monitor. They held hands and prayed as she stepped into the spotlight. The stage was bigger than anything Christina had ever seen. It stretched out before her like a vast ocean, and at the far end sat the 4 judges in their tall red chairs. But the chairs were turned away from her. That was how the blind audition worked. The judges could not see who was singing. They could only listen. And if they liked what they heard, they would hit the button in front of them, and their chair would spin around. The 4 judges were some of the biggest names in Italian music. There was Raffaella Carrà, a legendary singer and television icon who had been famous for decades. There was Noemi, a powerful vocalist known for her emotional performances. There was Piero Pelù, a rock star with wild hair and an intense stage presence. And there was J-Ax, a famous rapper covered in tattoos, known for his sharp tongue and honest opinions. These were the people Christina had to impress. These were the people who would decide if she had what it took to compete. The music began. The opening notes of the song filled the studio, soft and slow at first, building towards something bigger. Christina had chosen to sing a song called No One by Alicia Keys. It was a song about love and devotion, about standing by someone no matter what. For Christina, the song meant something deeper. It was about her relationship with God. It was about the faith that had carried her through every difficult moment of her life. She opened her mouth and began to sing. The first few words came out soft, almost gentle. But there was something in her voice, something that made people stop and pay attention. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet. They could feel it. They could feel the power and the emotion pouring out of this woman. They could not yet see clearly from their seats. On stage, Christina started to move. She swayed with the music, her habit flowing around her, her crucifix swinging gently against her chest. As the song built toward its climax, her voice grew stronger. She was not holding back anymore. She was giving everything she had, every ounce of passion and faith and love that lived inside her. J-Ax was the first judge to react. He had been listening with his eyes closed, nodding his head to the rhythm. Suddenly, his hand shot out and slammed the button in front of him. His chair spun around, and for the first time, he saw who was singing. His jaw dropped. His eyes went wide. He could not believe what he was seeing. A nun, a real nun in a full black habit, was standing on the stage, belting out an Alicia Keys song like a professional recording artist. The audience erupted. People started screaming, cheering, jumping up and down in their seats. The energy in the room exploded like a firework. One by one, the other judges followed. Noemi hit her button and spun around. Her hand flew to her mouth in shock. Piero Pelù turned next, his face a mixture of disbelief and pure joy. And finally, Raffaella Carrà, the legend herself, pressed her button and joined the others. All 4 chairs had turned. Every single judge wanted Christina on their team. But Christina was not finished. The song was still going, and she was not about to stop. She kept singing, her voice soaring through the studio, hitting notes that seemed impossible. Backstage, her fellow nuns were crying and hugging each other. In the audience, Strangers were wiping tears from their eyes. Even the judges, hardened professionals who had seen thousands of performances, looked like they were about to cry. When the final note rang out and the music stopped, there was a moment of pure silence. And then the room exploded again. The applause was deafening. People were chanting one word, over and over again. Sister. 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 Christina stood on the stage, breathing hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the judges who were all staring at her with wonder, at the cameras that were capturing every second. This was the moment she had dreamed about as a little girl in Sicily. This was the stage she had imagined while singing into her hairbrush. And here she was, not as a pop star in a glittering dress, but as a nun in a simple habit. The judges took turns speaking to her. They asked her why she was there. They asked her what her convent thought about her competing. They asked her if she was nervous. Christina smiled and answered honestly. She said she was there because she believed God had given her a gift, and she wanted to share it with the world. She said her Mother Superior had given her blessing, and when someone asked what the Pope might think about a nun singing on a television competition, Christina laughed and said she was still waiting for him to call. The audience loved her. The judges loved her. In that moment, everyone in the studio knew they had witnessed something special. Something that did not happen every day. Something that would be talked about for years to come. When it came time to choose a coach, Christina picked J-Ax. He had been the first to believe in her. The first to spin his chair around. The first to take a chance on a nun nobody had ever heard of. That meant something to her. In a world that often told her no, he had said yes. As she walked off the stage, her sisters rushed to meet her. They wrapped their arms around her and held her tight, all of them crying and laughing at the same time. They had come to support her, hoping for the best but prepared for anything. They never imagined it would go like this. Within hours, the video of Christina's audition was uploaded to the internet. Within days, it had millions of views. Within weeks, it had been watched over 50 million times. People all over the world were sharing it, talking about it, marveling at the nun who had stepped onto a stage and sung like an angel. The girl who was told that nuns did not belong in show business had just proven the whole world wrong. And she was only getting started. After that unforgettable blind audition, Christina Scuccia was no longer just a nun from Sicily. She was a phenomenon. Her face was everywhere. News channels around the world ran stories about the singing nun who had stunned the judges on Italian television. Newspapers printed her photo on their front pages. Social media exploded with clips of her performance, shared and reshared millions of times by people who could not believe what they were watching. But the competition was far from over. The blind audition was just the beginning. Christina still had to prove herself week after week, going up against talented singers who had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. Some of them had professional training. Some of them had already released music. All of them wanted to win. Christina returned to her convent in Milan between filming sessions. She still woke up early for morning prayers. She still helped serve lunch to children at the nursery school. She still attended evening mass with her fellow sisters. From the outside, her life looked the same as it always had. But everything had changed. More than 400 media outlets requested interviews with her. Journalists from every corner of the globe wanted to know her story. Television producers called the convent, hoping to book her for talk shows and special appearances. The quiet life she had known for years was suddenly filled with noise and attention and endless questions. Her coach, J-Ax, took his role seriously. He had promised the Mother Superior that he would protect Christina from the darker sides of show business. He kept that promise. During rehearsals, he pushed her to be better, to dig deeper, to find new ways to connect with the music. But he also shielded her from the chaos that surrounded the competition. He made sure she had space to breathe, space to pray, space to remain the person she had always been. Not everyone was happy about Christina's success. Some people within the Catholic Church criticized her decision to compete. They said a nun had no business being on a flashy television show. They worried that she was seeking fame and attention, that she was abandoning the humble life she had vowed to live. Conservative voices called her participation inappropriate and questioned whether her superiors should have allowed it in the first place. The criticism hurt. Christina had never wanted to cause controversy. She had never wanted to embarrass her order or disrespect her faith. All she wanted was to share the gift that God had given her. But she understood that not everyone would see it that way. She understood that some people would judge her no matter what she did. She responded to the criticism the only way she knew how. She kept singing. She kept praying. And she kept showing up, week after week, giving everything she had on that stage. The battles round came next. This was where contestants from the same team went head-to-head, singing the same song together, and the coach had to choose who would move forward. Christina faced off against another talented singer, and together they performed a high-energy version of Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper. It was a risk. The song was playful and fun, a far cry from the emotional ballad she had sung in her audition. But Christina threw herself into it, dancing and smiling and proving that she could do more than just belt out powerful notes. J-Ax chose her to advance. She was one step closer to the finale. As the weeks went on, Christina continued to surprise everyone. She sang Livin' on a Prayer by Bon Jovi, a rock anthem that seemed completely opposite to her quiet, religious life. But she made it her own. She brought energy and passion and joy to every performance, and the audience loved her for it. People who had never watched The Voice before started tuning in just to see what the singing nun would do next. Her fellow nuns watched every episode from the convent. They gathered around the television, cheering and clapping and praying for her success. When Christina did well, they celebrated like a family. When she faced tough competition, they held hands and asked God to give her strength. They were proud of her. Not because she was becoming famous, but because she was staying true to herself through all of it. The finale arrived on the 5th of June 2014. It was the biggest night of Christina's life. The show was scheduled to run for nearly 4 hours, broadcast live to millions of viewers across Italy. Only a handful of contestants remained, and each of them was fighting for the same prize: the title of Voice of Italy and a recording contract with Universal Music. Christina was nervous. She would have been lying if she said otherwise. But she had learned something important over the past few months. She had learned that her voice was not just about talent or technique. It was about truth. When she sang, she was not pretending to be someone she was not. She was simply being herself, a woman of faith who loved music and wanted to share that love with others. For her final performance, she chose a song called What a Feeling from the movie Flashdance. It was a song about chasing dreams, about taking risks, about believing in yourself, even when the odds are against you. For Christina, it was the perfect choice. It summed up everything she had been through, from the little girl singing into a hairbrush in Sicily to the nun standing on the biggest stage of her life. The music started, and Christina began to sing. She moved across the stage with confidence, her habit flowing behind her, her voice ringing out clear and strong. In the audience, her fellow nuns were on their feet, dancing and clapping along. The judges watched with smiles on their faces. Even the other contestants, her competitors, seemed moved by what they were witnessing. When the song ended, the audience erupted. The applause was so loud it seemed to shake the building. Christina stood in the middle of the stage, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the moment. She had given everything she had. Now all she could do was wait. The votes were counted. Millions of people across Italy had called in and texted to support their favorite contestant. When the results were announced, Christina could barely breathe. She had won. Sister Cristina Scuccia, the nun from Sicily, who had been told that singing on television was not appropriate for someone like her, had won the Voice of Italy with 62% of the vote. It was not even close. The people had spoken, and they had chosen her. But what happened next was even more powerful than the victory itself. Instead of celebrating with champagne or making a victory speech about her own talent, Christina did something unexpected. She lifted her wooden crucifix toward the ceiling and asked everyone in the studio to join her in prayer. She invited the judges, the other contestants, the audience, and the millions of people watching at home to pray the Our Father with her. And they did. In that studio, surrounded by cameras and lights and all the noise of show business, people bowed their heads and prayed together. It was not a church. It was a television set. But for those few minutes, it felt sacred. It felt like something more than a singing competition. It felt like a moment of genuine connection, a reminder that faith and joy and music could all exist in the same space. Christina had dreamed of this moment since she was a child. She had imagined what it would feel like to stand on a stage and be recognized for her voice. But she had never imagined it would happen like this. She had never imagined she would be wearing a habit instead of a glamorous dress. She had never imagined she would end the night not with a celebration of herself, but with a prayer for everyone who had supported her. She walked off that stage as a champion. But more importantly, she walked off as the same person she had always been. A woman of faith. A woman who loved to sing. A woman who had been told no more times than she could count. And who had proven that sometimes the world gets it wrong. The singing nun had done the impossible, and her story was far from over. Winning the Voice of Italy changed everything for Cristina Scuccia. One day she was a nun, living quietly in a convent in Milan, serving lunch to children, and praying with her sisters. The next day, she was an international celebrity with a recording contract from one of the biggest music labels in the world. Universal Music wanted to turn her into a star. They saw something special in her. Not just talent, but authenticity. In a world full of manufactured pop singers trying to be something they were not, Christina was real. She was different. And different sells. Her debut album came out in November 2014, just a few months after her victory. She called it simply Sister Christina. The album was a collection of cover songs, familiar hits that she reimagined in her own style. There was Coldplay's Fix You, a beautiful song about healing and hope. There was Somewhere Only We Know by Keane, a gentle melody about finding peace. And there was No One, the Alicia Keys song that had started it all. But the lead single was a choice that shocked almost everyone. Christina decided to cover Like a Virgin by Madonna. When people heard this news, they did not know what to think. Like a Virgin was one of the most famous and provocative pop songs ever written. The original was full of sensuality and suggestion. It seemed like the last song a nun would ever choose to sing. Critics scratched their heads. Church officials raised their eyebrows. People wondered if Christina had lost her mind. But Christina had a plan. She did not sing the song the way Madonna had sung it. She transformed it completely. She slowed it down, stripped away the danceable beat, and turned it into a soft, emotional ballad. In her version, the lyrics took on a different meaning. She sang about being touched for the very first time not by a lover, but by the Holy Spirit. She turned a song about physical desire into a song about spiritual awakening. Not everyone accepted her explanation. Italy's Religious Information Service, a Catholic organization, called her version a reckless commercial stunt. They accused her of using a controversial song just to get attention. Some people within the church were openly angry. They felt she had crossed a line that should never be crossed. The criticism was harsh. It came from people Christina respected, people whose opinions mattered to her. But she stood by her decision. She believed that art could be reinterpreted, that songs could take on new meanings depending on who was singing them and why. She had not set out to offend anyone. She had set out to share her faith in a language that the modern world could understand. Despite the controversy, the album sold well. Christina traveled to meet Pope Francis himself and personally handed him a copy. The Pope accepted it graciously. Whether he ever listened to her version of Like a Virgin, nobody knows. But the gesture meant the world to Christina. It felt like validation from the highest authority in her faith. In 2015, Christina took on a new challenge. She was cast in the Italian production of Sister Act, the beloved musical, based on the movie starring Whoopi Goldberg. She played the role of Sister Mary Robert, a shy young nun with a hidden singing talent. It was a role that seemed written just for her. Every night, she stepped onto the theater stage and brought the character to life, blending comedy and music and heart in a way that audiences loved. Life was busy. Life was exciting. Christina appeared on television shows, gave interviews, performed at concerts and special events. She competed on Dancing with the Stars in Italy, spinning across the dance floor in her habit while audiences cheered. She even traveled to America to appear on a talent show called The World's Best, where she sang Lady Gaga's Born This Way and earned a standing ovation. Through it all, she tried to stay grounded. She returned to her convent whenever she could. She continued to pray, to serve, to live by the vows she had taken. In 2019, she made those vows permanent, committing herself fully to the Ursuline order for the rest of her life. But something was changing inside her. Something she could not ignore. The fame that had once felt like a blessing was starting to feel like a burden. The constant attention, the endless questions, the pressure to always be on, always be performing, always be Sister Christina the singing nun. And somewhere along the way, Christina began to lose track of who she really was. She started asking herself difficult questions. Was she still the same woman who had entered the convent all those years ago? Did she still feel the same calling that had driven her to give up her dreams of pop stardom? Or had something shifted? Had she changed without even realizing it? Then the world stopped. In 2020, a pandemic swept across the globe, forcing everyone to stay home, to slow down, to sit with their own thoughts. For Christina, this period of forced stillness was both a gift and a crisis. Without the distractions of performances and interviews and travel, she had no choice but to look inward. What she found scared her. She did not feel at peace anymore. The habit that had once felt like a second skin now felt tight and uncomfortable. The rules and routines of convent life, which had once given her structure and purpose, now felt suffocating. She tried to push these feelings away, to convince herself that they were temporary, that she just needed to pray harder and trust more deeply. But the feelings did not go away. They grew stronger. Christina began working with a psychologist, someone who could help her untangle the complicated emotions she was experiencing. Session after session, she explored the questions she had been avoiding for years. Who was she without the habit? What did she actually want from life? Was it possible that her path had changed? That God was calling her somewhere new? The answers came slowly, painfully. But eventually, Christina made a decision that shocked the world just as much as her original audition had. In 2022, after 15 years as a nun, Christina Scuccia left the religious life. She appeared on Italian television, wearing a red pantsuit instead of her habit. Her hair was styled. She wore makeup. She looked like a different person. And in many ways, she was. She explained to the interviewer that she had not abandoned her faith. She still believed in God. She still treasured the years she had spent serving the church. But she could no longer stay in a life that no longer fit who she had become. She moved to Spain, where she took a job as a waitress to support herself. She continued to pursue music, but quietly, without the spotlight that had once followed her everywhere. She was starting over, building a new life from scratch at the age of 34. Some people were disappointed. Some felt betrayed. They had loved Sister Christina, the singing nun, and they did not understand why she would walk away from everything she had represented. But others understood. They recognized that people grow and change. They knew that the path we start on is not always the path we finish on. They respected Christina for having the courage to listen to her heart, even when it told her something she did not want to hear. In an interview, Christina said something that stayed with many who heard it. She said that change is a sign of evolution. It is scary because it is easier to hold on to what we know than to question ourselves. But sometimes, questioning is exactly what we need to do. The girl from Sicily who dreamed of singing became a nun who gave up that dream. The nun became a star who inspired millions. And the star became a woman, brave enough to reinvent herself one more time. Sister Christina is still inside her, she said. She always will be. That part of her journey is not erased. It is part of who she is, woven into her story, forever. And her story, like all the best stories, is still being written.